Entrepreneur Andrew Yang. Well, Mr. Yang has tripled his fundraising efforts and raised nearly $10 million this past fundraising quarter. He's the sixth top fundraiser for the quarter for the entire gigantic Democratic field.
Him out of a graphic again. Is a graphic on cash on hand. Andrew Yang tweeted, "Pretty sure we should be on this infographic, or on this graphic rather." Sanders, Warren, Buttigieg, Harris. And, Andrew Yang should be somewhere around here, Biden, and then Booker. And so you guys weighed in on this, and it was very funny. So Scott Santins, he said, MSNBC, okay, time to report on which Democrat candidates have the most cash on hand. Let's see. That Andrew Yang guy has $6.4 million after a massive Q3 haul of $10 million. That was the biggest growth of any candidate. But OMFG, Booker has $4.2 million in the bank. Yeah, so of course replacing Andrew Yang with Booker, right? And here's the graphic that shows really where everyone is when it comes to having cash on hand. And Andrew Yang right behind Biden.
Back now, when the news is still white hot, back now and still in this thing, it is my pleasure to say, is 2020 presidential candidate Andrew Yang. Mr. Yang, thank you so much for coming back, and it's really good to have you here.
Oh, thanks for having me back.
Sure, absolutely. So the last time we spoke, it was the day that Pelosi had announced the impeachment inquiry, and I do feel like these 23 days have been 23 years.
Sure, it felt like that for you, Rachel, because you've been in the midst of it every single day.
Does it not feel that way to you?
Oh, it does. I think it does for the country, unfortunately.
Yeah. I mean, we've learned a lot over the course of these last 3.5 weeks. Obviously, we've learned a lot more about the president's behavior toward Ukraine. You've said that you believe that he should be impeached for that. We've also seen him make the same ask of China. It appears that he was not joking, and it appears that he conveyed that in private to China as well. We also now have seen what happened in Syria. I feel a little bit, I said in the opening block, like the wheels are coming off a little bit. Like things haven't been good in a long time, but it feels like things are particularly bad right now. What's your feeling about that?
You get the same feeling. You feel like the limited guardrails that have been in place seem to be disintegrating before our eyes. We have to get him out of the Oval Office as quickly as possible.
This news today that he's going to direct the G7 conference to his resort in Florida. He floated this a few weeks ago, and it was greeted with shock. Members of Congress, in fact, committees in Congress immediately started investigating that as a potential, at least an intended violation of the Emoluments Clause. Presidents can't take money from foreign governments. This will, in effect, be forcing foreign governments to pay him in order to participate in that event. I don't know. I mean, obviously, the Democrats in the House and the House in general has to decide whether this should be folded into the impeachment, whether this should be handled differently. What do you think?
No, to me, if you're going to impeach him, you should definitely be considering different angles of approach and different charges. Mm-hmm. But what I said at the debate stage, Rachel, is unfortunately, the more we focus on Donald Trump, the more he wins. He's like a creature that needs attention to grow. And so what we have to do is we have to shift America's attention to what we're going to do the day after he's gone and start solving the problems on the ground. And the debate a couple nights ago was in Ohio. We lost Ohio by 8 points. And we know Ohio is the ultimate bellwether in our country as to who wins national elections. So we have to say to ourselves, OK, we have to win Ohio. And then what does that mean? We have to start getting into the dirt and solving the problems that got Trump elected.
In terms of what it's going to be like to take over the country the day after the Trump presidency ends, we do have a big new international crisis on our hands, created by President Trump.
Yes, unfortunately.
Yeah. And so in a Yang administration, if you were taking the reins right now in the midst of this conflagration, what would you do to try to salvage what we've just been through? I mean, I don't know how much worse it's going to be before the next president does take over, but if you were taking over right now, what would you do to try to fix it?
It's tough because you can't undo recent mistakes. What happened was our troops were there and it kept Turkey from taking certain actions. And as soon as those troops were removed, now we're seeing the result. But you can't turn back time. And I do believe that our being in Syria indefinitely had to end at some point. Just the way it was done was unduly abrupt, pulled the rug out from under our allies' feet. So we have to come together with our allies and try and find a multilateral solution that still will work in that region, but there's no easy answer.
Who would be our allies at this point? I mean,
yeah, exactly, unfortunately, because historically the Kurds have been there for us, and now you can understand why they wouldn't trust our commitment.
In terms of how we got into this, President Trump made this call immediately after getting off a phone call with President Erdogan. Vice President Pence was in Turkey today and announced that he had brokered a new deal. Right, the Turks wanted the Kurds out of that part of Syria. The president greenlit them coming in and invading and making that happen. The deal announced by President Pence today tells the Kurds they do need to get out of that area of Syria. The president made remarks today suggesting they should be cleansed from that area, ethnically cleansed out of that part of the country.
It's terrible.
I mean, Turkey is our NATO ally. Obviously, neither Russia nor Syria is our ally, nor can the Kurds ever be our ally again. I mean, should the United States essentially extract ourselves from that part of the world entirely, cede foreign influence there to Russia?
You know, we have to look at the options based on the reality on the ground.
Yeah.
And as I said, eventually we had to leave. And so if we got pulled out prematurely and abruptly, and the best course forward is to accept the reality on the ground, then unfortunately I think it's something we'd have to consider very strongly.
So you just walk away and leave it as it is?
Well, again, you can't turn back the clock. And so if you've already pulled troops out, then if you say, hey, if we put troops back in, then we can undo the damage that's been done, that may not be the case.
Would you do the same thing in Afghanistan, pull troops out and see what happened?
I certainly wouldn't pull troops out and see what happens. You know, we have to be judicious and do things in a very deliberate way, have transparency so that our allies see it coming. But we also, I believe, need to live up to the Constitution and end this forever state of war we've been in, where in the Constitution, it's up to Congress to declare war. And we've been putting ourselves into foreign theaters for the last 18 years and counting. And that's not the will of the American people. It's
very hard to imagine how the U.S. regains some of our bilateral alliances, let alone our role in the sort of Western liberal order after this presidency. Do you think that those ties are essentially dissolved and you have to sort of take them where they stand post-Trump? Or would you try to reassert, for example, the strength of NATO? Would you try to reassert the bilateral alliances that are really at this point broken because of this president?
To me, our foreign policy reflects what's happening at home. What happens at home is that we were disintegrating. Our communities are falling apart. It got so bad that tens of millions of our fellow Americans decided to go for Trump in 2016. And now we have this erratic and unreliable foreign policy that's making our allies throw their hands up. And so we have to rebuild here at home and then project a more reliable and sustained foreign policy. But I'm sure that our historic allies abroad are waiting with bated breath for a reasonable partner to get back into the White House and be able to live up to America's commitments.
Oh, I hope that's true. Sometimes, on good days, I think that's true. On bad days, I don't. I want to talk to you some more about that idea about domestic renewal when we come back. Andrew Yang is our guest. We'll be right back.